The next panel explores the critical role of open biobanking and material sharing in dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Please welcome moderator Vincent Moser from McGill University and panelists Naomi Allen from UK Biobank, MAHA RADHAKRISHNAN from Biogen, and Joanne Kamens from AdGene.
Thank you all for joining us today and welcome to our panel discussing open biobanks and material sharing. Through our discussion today, we will explore the importance of central repositories for openly distributing data and materials, especially in the context of COVID. My name is Vincent Moser. I'm a physician scientist. I have joined McGill last year as the chairholder of the Canada Excellence Research Chair in Genomic Medicine. I'm also the director of the COVID Biobank here in the province. And I will be joined today by Dr. Naomi Allen. As you have just heard in a lecture, Dr. Allen is the chief scientist for the UK Biobank. The UK Biobank continues to lead the way in demonstrating what an open approach to biobanking can accomplish. We will be joined by Dr. MAHA RADHAKRISHNAN. Dr. RADHAKRISHNAN is the group senior vice president and the chief medical officer. She's responsible for worldwide medical function at Biogen. She brings to the panel over a decade of experience working within the pharmaceutical industry. Of particular importance to today's panel are the insights she will share with us about the COVID Biobank that Biogen has helped to establish. We will be joined as well by Dr. Joanne Kamens. Dr. Kamens has been the executive director of AdGene since 2011. AdGene is the world-leading repository for sharing plasmids and distributes over 80,000 plasmids from over 4,000 research groups around the world. AdGene works has only become more important since the pandemic began, and we look forward to hearing from Dr. Kamens how AdGene has not only survived but thrived during this pandemic. As you have heard from Dr. Allen about some of the outstanding work that the UK Biobank is doing, so I'm going to start this session by handing the floor over to Dr. RADHAKRISHNAN, and I will ask her to share with us for 8 minutes approximately her perspective on COVID-19 and how Biogen banking efforts have been run. Afterwards, I will pass the floor to Dr. Kamens, and she will also have 8 minutes to tell us about how AdGene has been pushing the science forward during this pandemic. So thank you very much. Dr. RADHAKRISHNAN, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Moser, and thank you, everyone. Thanks to the audience. I'm really delighted to be able to be here with all of you virtually. Ideally, would have been nice to have the chance to meet everyone in person, but we make things work. And it's a delight. It's a pleasure to be here, to be able to share some of our experiences, share some of the background that we all live together, almost 11 months into this year. And I would love to walk you through some of that. As Dr. Moser said, I would love to talk to you more about the efforts that Biogen put in. But before that, I just want to give you a brief snapshot of who we are at Biogen. Many of you may know or may not know that Biogen is a pioneer in neuroscience. We're committed to collaborating with the scientific community and our collaboration partners as we seek to improve human health globally. We've been part of the ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem, for more than 40 years now and have continuously evolved with the goal of tackling some of the toughest diseases mankind has known. At Biogen, we care deeply about the unmet medical needs and the voice of the patient and the healthcare providers in everything we do. Neuro is part of the Biogen Canada Neuroscience Hub of Excellence in R&D. This is an initiative that Biogen Canada established about 3 years ago to have a group of renowned physician scientists, renowned academic centers in Canada with specialty in neuroscience and neuroscientists amongst the top in the world, and the infrastructure for doing all stages of clinical trials. Neuro is a great example of a renowned Canadian institution excelling in all of these criteria. This effort has led to about 25 active studies in Canada, a 50% increase in the overall creation of the hub, and 20% of our Biogen Canada revenues have been continuously invested in research with the Canadian institutions. Specifically, as part of this hub initiative, a science day was organized last year between Biogen and the neuro exchanging areas of interest and capabilities in neuroscience, inviting the Minister of Economy and the Innovation Center of Quebec, as well as local startups with capabilities in artificial intelligence. I also want to point out something that's near and dear to my heart in terms of real-world data generation is as part of our overall engagement with open science, Biogen Canada is founding partner in CanProCo, a real-world registry and a research community working to really better understand progression of MS. And it is a Canadian registry, the CNDR, for really looking at SMA and neuromuscular diseases. So now transitioning to the topic of COVID. The COVID pandemic is another example of where we all as one society can learn and benefit from open science, as Dr. Musser said. Open science indeed has played a very, very crucial role in the COVID-19 pandemic. Significant advances have been enabled by being this one community. And we as a scientific and medical community have really been able to work collectively together to overcome the challenges that have been brought to life in the last months of this year. As you all know, this pandemic had a very direct, very personal impact on the Biogen community, on many of my colleagues, including myself. We believe we are uniquely positioned to contribute to advancing the science behind understanding COVID-19 in an organized and deliberate way so we can all gain a better understanding of this virus. When COVID-19 was initially being detected earlier this year, we were all new to this. While several Biogen employees were recovering from COVID-19, one thing that became very loud and clear that our scientists, our physicians, our clinicians, our employees were all so eager to help really advance the science and a better understanding of what COVID-19 means to this world, to really be able to propel the medical research efforts. In response, I had reached out to several partners in the hospital and healthcare systems and the biomedical community here in Boston, one of which was Dr. Deborah Hung, a co-faculty member of the Broad Institute here in Boston, where she serves as the co-director of the Infectious Disease and Microbiome Program, and she's a professor in the Department of Genetics and Medicine at Harvard Medical School. We started in collaboration with the MIT, Brigham and Women's Hospital, and the Mass General Hospital, working in partnership with the State Department of Health, an initiative or a consortium called as the COVID Biobank. And what actually resulted from this was it helped us actually gain a deeper understanding of the epidemiology of the disease, of the immunology of the condition in a longitudinal manner. It was a tremendous opportunity to collaborate across borders, across institutions, across industry, and really reinforce our commitment to science and bring that close to the needs of humanity. And we are so proud that we were, as a company, as a community, able to contribute to this consortium. There are many benefits to open science. And in our case, the Biobank, we are hoping will continue to help scientists gather more and more information, really helping solidify and consolidate the scientific knowledge and depository we're building in the understanding of this very complex condition. One of the key things that this Biobank has helped accomplish is relatively within a short period of time when a community of people within Biogen developed COVID or were diagnosed positive with COVID in a relatively small group of people here in Massachusetts, what became very important for the scientific community to understand is to really understand the epidemiology, the demographics, but more importantly, be able to assess the levels of neutralizing antibodies to SARS-CoV-2 and really figure out, would this help us in really understanding how we go about developing treatment options for this condition? So this ability to collaborate across borders, where we were able to bring forward a cohort of patients, not just patients, but also family members and close contacts of folks who contracted COVID, to be able to donate their plasma for further research is something that we hold very near and dear to our heart. It has been a unique opportunity and our commitment remains. This is one of the reasons when Dr. Musser and his team invited us to be part of this panel, I willingly said yes, absolutely would love to do so. And thank you again for the time. I'm looking forward to the panel questions. Dr. Musser, back to you.
Oh, he's a little frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll start and we can work on the technical issues. Thanks for inviting me as well. So Addgene is not strictly a biobank. I admire very much the people that are out there collecting primary tissues and samples. It's incredibly important in this crisis. So fantastic to meet you and to see your fantastic work. Addgene is a materials repository. We call it a collection. And what we do is collect research materials mostly from academic, but also from for-profit organizations that want to share their plasmids openly with the world. And, you know, if you think that all of the research is funded by grants, we really think that everybody should be depositing their plasmids because we make it easy. It's free to deposit. That's part of our mission. We're a nonprofit. And we take care of all the expenses of depositing. And then for a small fee, you can request a plasmid from Addgene. And just to give you an idea of scale, we've distributed 1.25 million plasmids. That saved scientists something like 700 hours of cloning time, 700 years of cloning time, which is just estimating at about 5 hours of plasmid. Any molecular biologist out there knows that that's probably an underestimate in the world of molecular biology. And so we ship about 850 items a day and to scientists in 103 countries. And our most recent new countries were Tanzania, and Uganda and Botswana. So we're very excited to be reaching into Africa and really democratizing the use of materials that are being shared with everyone. And so Addgene also took a step a few years ago. We realized that academic scientists in particular really didn't have access to the generation of AAV vectors very well, ready for experiments, many of them, of course, for neuroscience. That's a technique that's used a lot in neuroscience experiments. And a lot of the great science on AAV is in for-profit companies. It's proprietary. It's for gene therapy. And those companies were not sharing their technologies for creating high-quality, quality-controlled materials. And we did a survey, and the materials that bench scientists were using were pretty bad. And so from an issue of scientific reproducibility, we felt this was a way that Addgene could help, creating prepared AAV vectors from the plasmids in the repository. And we have a large project ongoing with a huge bank of available materials that are off the shelf, ready for experiments for scientists. We have a project coming in the future. It's not public completely yet, but I think this community would be very excited about a repository for neuroscience recombinant antibodies. And I hope to be able to announce more news about that very soon. Communal and open, of course, open for everyone. So the other thing that Addgene really creates is community. We're sort of the Amazon, but we're also the Facebook of plasmids, if you will. We collect information and data and lore about the plasmids. We create an enormous amount of educational content, and as do our depositors. They share their protocols and educational content with us as well and with the community. We have an AAV data hub in beta where scientists are sharing the data with the materials they get from us, so scientists can see which tissues they work in, what the conditions were for those studies, and really just increases the value of the materials. Even though the money is not a lot to spend, the information you get from Addgene can be huge. And we know that industry and nonprofit organizations are using Addgene data. We can tell we get millions of web hits every month, and they're from all over. So we're happy about that. Our information, of course, are all open. So the crowdsourced nature of this, of course, the first time this really took off, just to mention quickly before I get to the COVID response, was with CRISPR. And, the first papers that came out with those CRISPR tools, the the authors of those papers knew how popular their materials were going to be, and they deposited with Agene pretty much concurrent with publication, which meant that the next day our phone started ringing off the hook. And I will tell you that Agene grew 30% in that first year or so, when CRISPR materials were wanted in every lab in the world. To date, we've distributed almost 250,000 CRISPR-related materials. We also have a lot of neuroscience resources, which are also very highly distributing. So what happened? March 23rd here in Boston, a few weeks, about 10 days before Agene had closed due to a rumor of a case on site, I just sent everybody home. It was this is a time of leadership challenge, I will tell you, in the world. So my heart goes out to anyone who had to make that decision. We just sent everybody home because we didn't know what to do. But 2 weeks later, the Agenes came back with masks and hand washing and distancing because scientists were knocking down our door to deposit SARS-CoV-2 related plasmids and materials. We had to accelerate deposit, and I am unable to tell you how heroic our small staff was in getting materials quality controlled, which means sequence verified and online within days from deposit. And the requests were coming in fast and furious. Not all of the labs that were requesting had a loading dock, so we had to individually figure out how to get these packages to people. We ship about 400 packages a day, so that's not a small thing. This was an enormous amount of work, so I just want to give a shout out to the Agenes who really responded to this crisis all over, the ones that are on site and on site still every day, picking and distributing. We're distributing back up to about 800 items a day again. So we've distributed about over 10,000 just SARS-CoV-2 related materials, but of course, many materials in the repository are being used for research on coronavirus, as in fluorescent markers, genetic tools, reporters, all of the other types of molecular reagents you need when you're studying a new disease, a new process. So I guess I would say that so Agene has always been self-supporting. That is, our budget is what we get from distribution almost entirely. And in the crisis, I want to shout out to the FAST Grants program and Chan Zuckerberg initiative, because they stepped in. When we closed for 2 weeks, that was very hard on Agene's budget. We have a very small margin, and as a nonprofit, that we were in some danger, and reduced distribution for this whole year has really put us in a difficult financial position. But I think that granting agencies, I hope, are starting to see the value of supporting centralized resources. It's not sexy.
Aha, it worked.
Okay, but I'm seeing Tal here on the phone.
Yeah, we don't see Dr. Kamens either.
Yeah, can you show Dr. Kamens as well? It's great to have Tal here. Okay, but I cannot hear. Oh. We cannot hear you.
Okay.
Can the technician help, please?
I'm back.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure we have listened to the end of your presentation. Are you done with your
Yeah, I
presentation?
just finished on a plea for funders to recognize.
Yeah, but I'm trying. Okay. Okay. Great. Sorry for the technical problems on my end as well. It happens. Internet was disconnected suddenly, so I had to jump in. I thank the person who has been introduced, you, Dr. Kamens, on the spot.
Okay.
So thank you very much. We are coming to the end of this first part of the panel that was moderator-led, and we are very privileged to have these two short presentations on top of the superb presentation that Dr. Allen was giving. Now it's to the audience to work, and we would like the audience to tell us what would be the most important topic they would like us to discuss. And so there is a list of 8 different topics on the website, each of them attached with a number. So if you have a topic which is of particular interest to you, please put this number into the chat, and Dylan will collect these votes and tally them. And so we will prioritize them. So please spend a couple of seconds or minutes to read them and put one number or 2 on the chat. Thank you. In the meanwhile, I've got this question. It's wonderful to have 3 absolutely outstanding women on this panel, extremely successful women, role models, I'm sure, for younger scientists who are also exploring their future career. Is there any advice that one of you may give to a younger woman scientist who is planning a career? You've been so successful, so really, I'm sure there is lots to learn from you on top of open science. So Maha.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dr. Musar. This is a question that gets put to me quite often, and I tell people, I did not have someone that I could look up to in terms of when I was making switches in my careers, etc. But my one word of advice to people is, work hard, stay humble, and never give up. As long as you put your best efforts in and you follow your heart, right? You go with what you're passionate about, right? And don't hesitate to make those tough calls, because it's not always easy to make a transition. But if you're focused, you work hard and you stay humble, success is yours.
I'm sure lots of people will appreciate this piece of advice. Yeah. Yes.
I look forward to the day when we don't even notice that there's a panel with 3 women. So fingers crossed that happens. And I also, as I said to Vincent before, I have advice for the men too, by the way. So, but I guess I would say, seek mentors, because so many of us, women, men, everybody, it doesn't matter. You need multiple mentors in your career, and do favors for other people, because those favors that you do in your networking and in your relationships will come back to you.
Thank you, Johan. Yeah, Naomi, please.
So, well, you can't do it all, right? And I think there's a great pressure on women to have a great career, be a perfect mum, get the tea on the table, read them a bednight story. You can't, there's not enough hours in the day to be able to do everything all the time. So don't beat yourself up that you can't do everything. And so if I was going to give advice to anyone, it would be to make your priorities and stick to them and learn to say no.
That was important. Thank you for these 2 minutes here. It's not directly open access, but it's really important, and I appreciate your comments there. I'm turning towards Dylan maybe, or somebody there. Oh, we have got now some ranking. And maybe I can give you the top ranking topic, the importance of engaging and enabling communities of users. Does one of you want to start? Each of you have a superb story to tell. Maybe I will turn towards Naomi, because Naomi, you described this superb community of thousands, 17,000 researchers, I think, applying for the UK Biobank resources. So would you mind commenting on this topic?
Sure. Well, when we first started out in 2012, it was mainly UK-based academics who started using the resource, because frankly, they were the only ones who knew about it, and they helped us to develop it. And it actually wasn't until the genetic data in 2017 was made available that researchers, particularly from the US and also from Europe, kind of sat up and thought, well, what's this? And once we had to go over to the States a lot and explain to people, look, there's no catch. You can download the data. There's no GDPR issues. It only costs this much money. You're not bound by any difficult legal agreements. and they couldn't quite believe it. But once that, particularly the genetic data was out there and people started to use it, it just kind of snowballed. And now it's the kind of go-to resource, particularly for people in genetics and genetic epidemiology. And then success breeds success. And, you know, now it's reaching out, you know, globally around the world. So engaging in communities. We started off small with the people that we knew, and then we kind of reached out after that. And then once a few big players get involved, they start telling their mates about it. It just kind of snowballs from there. It's an organic process and it takes time.
Yeah, I would leapfrog on that. You can do all the marketing that you want, but when scientists tell other scientists that your service is good and useful, that's the marketing that you need. So at least in the scientific community, we have found. We like to raise awareness. We like to go to conferences and visit. We do one-on-one visits for almost 2 decades, we've been going one-on-one with scientists to explain all the benefits of sharing. So for us, it's that word of mouth. And we have when a plasmid on Adgene's repository has been distributed 100 times, the depositor becomes a blue flame depositor, and they get a little award. I used to have one in my office here. I don't have it. And wow, they can't wait to get that award. They're so proud of their impact, and they show those off on social media and in their organizations. And that pride in sharing and open and the impact, you know, that's priceless. That's priceless for science. It's priceless for the community. So we do everything we can to increase community engagement and open in the value of taking the few extra minutes to put your DNA in the mail.
Thank you. That's an important comment here as well. Maybe I can turn towards MAHA. From your perspective, would you like to comment on this topic?
Yeah, I'll build on what my fellow panelists said. I think it's very important that in fact, we did not even try to build the community of users. It got built by itself, right? I'm hearing my colleagues say the same thing is we know the ripple effect or just the way this kind of took off was it knew no boundaries. It started off with the healthcare institutions. It started off with the big companies here in Massachusetts. Obviously, Biogen was one of the first. But then what quickly became evident was not just the hospital systems and the healthcare, state departments of health, but it was cross boundaries, cross continents, and also technology companies jumped in. Like I know companies like IBM, for example, offered up their services almost instantaneously in terms of artificial intelligence instead of looking at huge data sets to really understand what's going on. Because what became front and center, that started off as a small problem, became a problem of humanity. So I really think the power of the community was truly unleashed in the situation. And I think in many ways, COVID has propelled the momentum of a new best practice that once COVID is, even if it's behind us, we need to continue on this and build on this. So what it's taught us is that being siloed in our own little bubbles is not the way we advance, that we really need to break down those barriers.
Yeah, I'd like to add one other thing to that. MAHA, that is a visionary way of looking at it. The barriers are so debilitating. In fact, Adgene's one of our larger barriers is that most of our distribution is to academic scientists only because of third-party rights, depositor concerns, whatever. But with COVID, the depositors came to us and said, we want it all open. Anybody can get it. Industry, for-profit, nonprofit, fully. And we've been working on this initiative to go fully open for some years. And this took us up a notch finally. And now we are getting whole organizations that are willing to sign on as fully open, which is a big change for us, using either the open MTA or an industry MTA. That is just how it should be. These barriers for basic research are not going to slow invention and money making. I think they're going to increase it, in my opinion. Absolutely. So keeping that as a barrier is just unreasonable.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing in terms of enabling communities, when you think of big data, one of the real problems, barriers we've had as an organization is just the sheer size of the data has meant that it's only really the big industries and big academic users who have got the compute power to be able to manage the data. So it's the likes of Stanford, Broad, Oxford, who are the really heavy users of UK Biobank. And we don't have any users or very few users in Africa or Asia. So in terms of enabling other communities to use the resource, we're now moving, and I said this at the end of the talk, we're moving towards a cloud-based analysis platform so that researchers can go to the data rather than the data going to the researchers, do their analyses in situ, which we very much hope will democratize access around the world. So that's another way that we're trying to enable other users to access the data.
I think these are messages of hope, and I'm really grateful to you all for doing that and for sharing that as well. I hope we will keep this momentum as well beyond COVID and use that as a best practice in the future. I should also acknowledge that this did not happen by chance, and I'm sure that here the genomic community has been paving the way with the UK Biobank, showing that there is no big harm in sharing the data. That's the only way forward, especially when we're talking about genetics. Are there any other comments on this particular topic? If not, I'm moving to the topic which was ranked second, the value of industry and non-industry collaborations in biobanking and material sharing. That's an interesting one as well. I'm particularly interested in this one as well. I've spent 10 years in industry. I've spent 20 years in academia. So I'm just very much looking forward to listening to your points on this very topic. Maha, would you like to start this time?
Sure. I'll start it off, and I'm sure my colleagues will add on their perspectives. So I think, for us, this was an aha moment. It was a revealing moment because when we talk about industry, cross-industry, non-industry collaborations, Biogen obviously belongs to the pharma biotech industry, but we collaborated across borders, right? When the moment we started kind of raising the noise or the information that maybe something is going on, I should tell you, I applaud the healthcare resource teams here in Massachusetts. I applaud the State Department of Public Health for kicking their action so quickly in. It's unbelievable. It may not have been evident to the outside world as to how around the clock people worked to bring together sources and people from the public health department, from the different institutions of health, from our company, and trying to, minute by minute, try to understand what's going on. We would not be where we are today without acknowledging the frontliners, who have been at the front and center of treating these patients, whether they're in the hospitals, whether they are in some other institutions. For me, what also came through was, and I think this was a point Naomi just mentioned about data privacy. Yes, we all acknowledge and respect the need for data privacy, but in times like these, what we need to understand is while we try to keep the patient information private because of HIPAA or whatever it may be, we need to come together as one community because scientists, clinicians, experts are everywhere. They're not just sitting in academia. They're sitting in pharma, they're sitting in companies like Adgene, they're sitting in areas like the biobank, and we need to have the best of minds coming together. So we can't create barriers by saying, oh, you belong to pharma, so you can't come here because it's not right. So I think if there was one learning I take back from all of this is that we really need to open up our minds to cross-industry collaboration, information sharing, and take open science in the true way. So that, and lots of publications have come out as a result of the biobank effort that Biogen contributed to, which is fantastic, right? We've been able to trace back the roots of where was the insertion, where was the genome, how did it spread? But I would say going forward, we really need the best of minds to come together without implications for saying data privacy and not make that a barrier. We all appreciate what data privacy is, and we don't need to be privy to the details of the people who are donating. But to be able to collectively get involved in analyzing the information, understanding the pathobiology, the immunology, the epidemiology is crucial.
Thanks, Maha, for these comments. I'm sure that Johan and Naomi will add also their contribution to this topic. Who wants to start? Johan?
Sure. So, I mean, as I mentioned, we see this. I came to Agene after 20 years in pharma and biotech for profit. I worked in pharma for 15 years. And when I got to Agene about 10 years ago, I said, oh, not shipping to industry, this isn't good. We got to fix this, you know, and it's 10 years later. So it has been a struggle. And so I'm delighted that with COVID, I think we see the for-profit and the nonprofit organizations willing to say, hey, some things are of value, but a plasmid, probably not. Only valuable if we share it. That's the change. These data are only valuable if we share them. If we keep them to ourselves, they lose their value so fast, actually. So we have a lot of for-profit organizations that are starting to deposit with Agene and encourage distribution of their materials through the repository or derived materials. A lot of companies say, you know, we have this collection of plasmids in the freezer. They're not on any product. We should get those out there for scientists to use, you know. So we're starting to have that. Novartis has shared quite a lot of useful materials that are quite popular, a barcoding library, very valuable materials to scientists. If they had to be recreated, they would cost labs tens of thousands of dollars on their own. So really making our research dollars go further, and only by sharing can we make the research dollars go far enough. We have so much to do that we just absolutely have to start seeing this as the normal model. I'm not talking about products. I believe in products. I worked in pharma for 20 years. I'm all for somebody making a drug that helps people. It's pharma companies that do that. It's device companies that do that. Academia doesn't do that. But we need to work together with the resources to maximize the value of the tools that we have. And so, to my mind, I would say anecdotally, one other thing is when you have a repository like ours or a biobank where things have started to be open, the for-profit partners that don't see where the future is going are suffering. So people now at this point, if they don't share that, allow their derived materials to be shared from Agene. So we don't distribute anything that a for-profit company sells. We only sell derivatives thereof, customized materials from labs. If they stop the flow, what happens is scientists don't use their materials. There's no academic data for this new field, and then industry is not interested in that as a technology. So we have seen whole companies suddenly realize that they better open up their sharing through Agene in order to make their materials attractive to the customers that might eventually license them. So we almost make it so that you lose out if you don't share. And I think it's going that way with biobanks as well. You lose out if you don't share, because if you don't share, you won't have access like everybody does, you know. So I would like to turn the script around where sharing is the default and not the. Actually, I will tell you, a huge percentage of Agene's resources go to soliciting deposits. If we didn't have to do that, if everybody just deposited, we could charge even less for our materials. So.
Thank you, Johan.
I fully agree with all that, and I think the tide is really starting to change. And I hope that the COVID pandemic has actually been a real turning point in data sharing, because without it, we wouldn't be where we are in terms of vaccine development and drug treatments and so on. So I hope we've learned a lesson there. But I think more widely, and I've been an academic for 30 odd years, and seeing that actually collaborate with just like-minded scientists who work in industry, who are just as much expertise in or more in data science, epidemiology, bioinformatics, whatever it is, can enable really fantastic collaborations that you just wouldn't have if you're purely in an academic department or purely in a pharmaceutical department, because you bring different perspectives to the issue. And I think for UK Biobank, the fact that when we started off, we maintain a level playing field between commercial and non-commercial, exactly the same access charges, exactly the same agreements and signing up processes, meant that industry coming in to perform assays on apples, Biogen or one of them, it means it's a win-win for everybody, because the pharmaceutical companies who are performing assays, there might be genome sequencing or metabolomics or whatever it is, they get advanced access to data that they need for their drug discovery work, but the global research community then get rapid data availability that frankly would not be able to have been funded through the public sector. So it's this coming together of academic and commercial entities is a huge win-win for the public and for scientific discovery all around. And I really hope that people can learn that lesson and then move forwards in a really collaborative manner. And I'm hoping that COVID has enabled that.
That was important messages. Thank you. Can I ask you a question, maybe to NAOMI and to MAHA? Among the participants of the biobank, did you have any resistance among the participants? That means people saying, no, I don't want to be part of this biobank because I don't want to give money to industry. They will get rich and I will get poor. And so, no. Has it happened?
No, I mean, I can tell you this is there was an overwhelming response. You know, while our Mass General and Brigham folks were getting ready to open up the biobank, the number of employees calling them and getting, and in fact, we were getting calls frustrated saying, why are we not getting calls back? I said, guys, the system is overwhelmed, allow the healthcare providers to get ready for this. So I can tell you this, I applaud the human courage that came through. The need to help fellow human beings was just overwhelming. Never once did people hesitate. That not just once, we've given blood in a longitudinal manner, right? Because we were asked to come back to look at antibodies and immunological parameters. No hesitation at all.
Thank you.
For UK Biobank, we have participant meetings regularly, and often a participant will come up to me and say, I don't think it's very fair that you're charging big pharmaceutical companies the same as academics, and why are they getting their data at the same cost? And when you explain to them that actually the purpose of all of this research is to develop better treatments for the future generations, is to find those scientific discoveries for public health, it's only by working industry that you can really do that quickly and effectively. Once you educate the participants and the wider public about that, then all of those insecurities and doubts fade away.
But there's one thing that I would like to see maybe slightly different as we go into the future. Hope this situation doesn't repeat. But in the interest of open science is being able to get back some information to the people that are willingly donating their samples may be a good one. Granted that we did not have time on our side. We didn't have the capabilities or capacity to be able to turn things around and provide information real time back to people who were donating. If there was one thing that I would have liked to see happen differently is to be able to provide that information back real time so people understand the impact of what they're doing, as well as also get some information back on their own condition, because the data that's coming out of the biobank is all collated, right? It's all summarized. So it's not really giving people information back on their status. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing. All I'm saying is if I were to go into the future and I had to change something, that would be something that I would like to opine on.
What I take from this discussion is a message of hope. And there is hope in science, there is hope in humans, there is hope in progress, while always respecting the individual. And I'm so very glad to have had this conversation with you. I think your organizations have demonstrated generosity, openness, and certainly a very big impact as well on, at the end of the day, public health. I don't know how much time we have, but I'd like to turn to each of you and ask you a final comment. A couple of minutes each, if you don't mind. Who wants to start?
I guess I would say there's a lot of scientists watching this. Don't make us come to you to share, to be open. It has to be integrated into your scientific practices. All of your data, all of your materials, every time you publish, think about how, from the beginning of a study, how you're going to make it open. Because the effort to enforce that and create it is not yet happening. It's a lot of effort for organizations like ours. And so if people would start doing that as a natural part of their research process, we would all benefit tremendously.
Yeah, maybe I'll go next. I think what COVID has taught us, or the journey that we've been on the last 11 or so months, has been an incredibly humbling experience for all of us. Biogen has been caught in the middle of the controversy saying we have initiated a super spreader event. And I tell people, I'm a physician, forget it. Even if I'm not a physician, would I willingly go into a public setting to spread an event? So I think we need to be careful how we start labeling things. We all know that COVID caught us off guard, but let us take this as a lesson of how someone or a company or a group or an organization can take the most adverse of times and turn it around and say, how are we going to help humanity? Which is why I think of this as a humbling moment, about we've learned a lot, but we haven't conquered COVID yet. Hopefully the news on the Pfizer vaccine, the Lilly antibody are glimmers of hope for us, but our task is not over yet. But we will conquer it.
Thank you,
I think my take-home message from listening to being involved in this discussion is that collaboration is really key, and that's what we've learned from the COVID crisis, is that, people with completely different skill sets have had to come together to make sense of what the transmission, the epidemiology, the treatments, vaccines, and so on. And, my advice to anybody would be to not sit in your comfort zone and your own little silo, and actually to reach out to others who are not in your field of expertise, and to work jointly with them, whether they're academic, whether they're industry. There's no need, we can blur the distinctions, that doesn't matter, to work collaboratively to make the next scientific discovery, because that's the only way we're going to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Big challenges ahead of time, big opportunities as well, and certainly wonderful human values to make it happen. I probably suspect that we are getting close to the end of our panel discussion. I would like to thank you very much for your generosity and for attending this panel, which I believe has been extremely, at least for me, interesting. I'd like to thank the audience as well for staying with us, and I wish the organizers full success for the rest of this 2-day seminar. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.